Welcome 3rd through 5th grade teachers to the third part of our learning series on the foundational skills section of the unit planning organizer. So starting at the beginning of the unit, in the overview portion, you won't find any information about foundational skills in this section. So we're really just going to scroll down past all of this. Essential questions and unit learning goals do not have any information about foundational skills. Now, when you get to the high leverage and complementary TEKS, there is a portion right here that is referencing the TEKS covered through foundational skills. So those are the specific ones for this unit. Also, in the reading language arts assessments, there is not anything specific to foundational skills, although some of the grammar, as far as revising and editing questions, might use some of the materials. Some of that is helpful to have. But our unit pacing guide does. And here we go. Foundational skills is coded in purple right here. I see it listed for 15 minutes. Remember, this is 15 minutes of direct instruction with students, and always be thinking that students need active, connected practice for things like foundational skills. So anything that you are doing above the 15 minutes, we want to have students practicing during differentiated small group, either with cooperative groups, partners, or independently. I can see that for week 3, students will be talking and learning about short and long A sounds. Week 4, they'll be looking at short and long E sounds. And week 5, short and long I sounds. And just like we've covered before, you can either click right here on this link to take you straight to that lesson week, or you can use the outline on the left-hand side. If you don't see the outline, look for the little hamburger icon here. Click on that, and you can see week 3 foundational skills, week 4 foundational skills, and week 5 foundational skills. So I'm going to use the sidebar today. I've got week 3 foundational skills. And what I have going on is that our foundational skills are listed much like you have seen the other blocks, right? So week 3, foundational skills, it's 15 minutes. And this is aligned with week 1 of the module listed in HMH, what makes us who we are. And then you can see the focus being short and long A sounds. At the top, you see the ALPS and the TEKS specific to that week of instruction. The boxes underneath give you some important information, the high frequency words that students will encounter during that lesson, and then a list of spelling words. And this is categorized as the basic words, the review words, and challenge words. So you can use these to work with students and provide some differentiation. Digging in past that, you will see a pattern for the daily lessons from the foundational skills. There is a day of decoding practice, followed by a day of spelling and fluency practice, followed by another day of decoding practice. And then the final day of the week, you have some options for assessment. Now remember, I said that foundational skills were not on the unit assessment, and that's because they are included at the end of every week as an option for kind of a quick check-in foundational skills assessment for spelling and or fluency. Just like the other sections, each day is listed with a learning objective. Then you'll see the topic being covered along with some page numbers, a bulleted list of resources and materials, and the suggested formative assessment for that lesson. So let's go ahead and dig into day 2's lesson, because I think it's really important for you to understand how HMH intends for you to use this lesson, and how AISD, as our curriculum team, we have paced this lesson out, because I want you to remember we only have 15 minutes for this, and that is not what HMH has. So I'm going to go click on the page for the first day of lesson. And I want you to notice that this is lesson 1 in HMH. It is also lesson 1 in our week. And just like we've seen in vocabulary and reading, this lesson is paced out as a step 1, a step 2, and a step 3. The bulk of the lesson that you are going to use is right here in the center of the page. The learning objectives and materials linked are on the left-hand side. Remember, those are already linked for you in the UPO. Additionally, the information at the bottom in the gray is just some supportive information. This is not necessary. It's just to help support either English language learners or if you have students who need some correction or redirection. So remember, 15 minutes. Now, if you've ever noticed before, HMH puts these nice little clocks at the top of the lesson to say how long. So they expect this one part of the lesson to be 15 minutes. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the next day's lesson, which is about spelling and fluency. And if I go click on these page numbers, you will notice that HMH still lists this as lesson 1. So HMH intended for you in one day to do 15 minutes of decoding, followed by 15 minutes of spelling, followed by 15 minutes of fluency. So some quick math tells us that is a 45-minute foundational skills lesson, which we do not have time for. So instead, as curriculum writers, we decided that the best thing to do with the amount of time we had was to divide that lesson between 2 days. Now, we still have the issue on the second day of it being spelling and fluency. And so you're going to have to make some judgment calls about your 4th graders. If some of them are struggling more with spelling, then I would focus on that for your tier 1 instruction. And then maybe you have 5 or 6 students in your group that are struggling with fluency. Maybe you preserve that lesson and work on that in small group with them. Or you could just try to do all the pieces of it and just see if that lesson ends up being a little bit longer that day. Remember that the 15 minutes is really how much time you are directly teaching students. So always be thinking within the lesson, is this a piece that I can hand over to let them work on independently or in small group while I'm calling groups later in the day? So lesson 1, again, has been split between day 2 and 3, or it's been split into 2 days. When I look at the 3rd lesson of the week, this one is a single decoding lesson and nothing was intended to go after it. These are the only 3 lessons that HMH includes for foundational skills. And we really felt that we needed to have a checkpoint for foundational skills at the end of the week. So we're just having you check back in with spelling and fluency because you did those earlier in the week. And that is really it for foundational skills in the UPO. You will notice, let me jump to week 4 foundational skills. We're following the same pattern. There's a day of decoding. Well, starting from the top, all the pieces are there, just like you saw on the first week. High frequency words and some spelling words. And then you'll see day 2, day 3, decoding, spelling fluency, decoding again, and then a foundational skills assessment. And if I go look at week 5, I'm going to see the exact same pattern: decoding, spelling fluency, decoding, and then spelling fluency again. Heading back to that foundational skills lesson, just to unpack the lesson a little bit, I think that it is really nice to go through and look at some of the pages and things that they have offered. So the display and engage is really just a poster that gives you a lot of words. You can all together practice some of the some reading and decoding of short A and long A sounds. You could also have these words written on a whiteboard, or you could copy this page into a Google slide so that you can highlight and underline things from it. The Know It, Show It pages for foundational skills are pretty good. This one is all right. It's just having them identify if it's a short A or a long A sound. So I don't know if I would make a copy of that page, but sometimes they get a little more in depth. So always, be a critical consumer before you're making prints and copies of these pages. When we look at the spelling and fluency materials, there's quite a bit more involved. So there are dictation sentences. Students don't need a copy of the dictation sentences. This would just be something that you could use to call out the words and do some review. Now, I personally think 20 words is quite a bit. You might decide to cut that back to 10, either just taking the first 10 or skipping around and looking at some ones that maybe you've seen your students having a bit of a struggle on. Other things involved, they're the spelling word cards. Every spelling decoding lesson involves a sort at some point, and then spelling word cards the same. Obviously, these are just word cards, and so you could use sticky notes if you didn't want to make a copy. Use sticky notes and write them out, or sentence strips, index cards, and put them in a pocket chart would be nice too, to make them more functional. For 3rd through 5th grade, I love this activity. This is a proofreading practice, and what a great way to actively practice this style of testing in a less testing environment, right, than just like a daily activity. So you've got your what looks like an editing style passage with the sentences numbered and what change should be made, and these are aligned. I also appreciate that there is a short answer portion so students can actively write instead of just marking the multiple choice. And then, of course, there's the fluency passage. So there's one passage per week. These passages are usually aligned to the topic of the unit, so they are nice to go through. And there's one for each week. So maybe just having a couple copies and putting them in a station for students to practice. Again, here is one more Know It, Show It page. So this one's a little more complex, but you could also have students write this chart out, or you could have this chart on a piece of chart paper and have them go over and sort the words. All right, so those are all of the resources for foundational skills. Again, it's just spaced out. It follows a pattern every week, and don't feel compelled to do both spelling and fluency. We're giving you both of these options here, but as you get to know your students, you're going to get to find out which of those assessments and which of those practice opportunities would benefit which students more. So both are important, but don't feel compelled to do both. Really activate what do you need for each group of students. So that is the end of part 3 for covering foundational skills, and we would love to see you back for part 4, where we will be talking about the writing workshop.